You're good.
Oh, did you?
I'm recording.
All right. So yes, Matt Budis, you go to external links, then you go to AP, then you go to Mr. Gideon's lectures. If you want to go directly to YouTube and look for the lectures and the audio on your own, that's fine, but it's difficult. It's difficult. It's just really, because I have it under my playlist, it's much easier to just go to external links, and there they are, okay? So the account name is Eagle Business, all one word. You could search for it that way, but then you have to get into playlists, and I've got the Econ commercials. I've got, examples for other classes, things to look at. But for you guys, it's all in AP Econ. Now, if you go there, you'll see that it's in reverse chronological order. So it has the review from earlier this week first. That was in room 508. The next two pieces, those are pieces from the same review that happened in the Media Center. That was on April, whatever it was, 28th, I guess. All right, and then you have stuff from earlier this semester if you scroll down. All right, you might hear yourself, probably won't see yourself, but you hear yourself talking, perhaps. So that's what all this stuff is. And then there's a little bit of Kane versus Hyatt rap battle. There's a part 2 out. So both of those are there as well. Okay. Next Tuesday after the review, hopefully by that night, you'll see a new thing. It'll be, as soon as I'm done with the review, I'll try to upload it to YouTube. Hopefully by that night, if YouTube cooperates, you'll be able to see the review so that if you have something going on, I know people have conflicts, you'll be able to see what we're saying. Okay? Any questions on resources? Okay. So what I want to do today is, as I mentioned the last time I was here, and sorry I couldn't be here the last class, I've just really been struggling on and off with being sick the last week or two. And so I just didn't have it in me to be here last time. But fortunately, it looks like you were able to more or less navigate the class time constructively. At the very least, my goal was for you to know how to find AP Central's resources. And you're able to do that for the freaks, right? If you haven't already, maybe this was the first time. Raise your hand if this was the first time you've gone to AP Central yourself and looked at the past freaks with all the answers and stuff. All right, so that's good. I'm glad we did that. So now you know how to go there and look at the past answers, look at sample responses and so forth. All right. Now, everybody needs to get an AP Macro exam 2005. If you don't have one, grab one right now. And then open your books to chapter 30, please. Chapter 30. As I said last class, we're going to be reviewing some of this stuff for other people to be the first time that they've heard this. So that's one of the reasons I'm going over it again. But in chapter 30, 2 classes ago, for the first time, we actually discussed why you would have trade restrictions. If you go back to before the break, we were talking about lower marginal opportunity production costs, we're talking about comparative advantage, and it makes it all sound good. Free trade is good stuff. If you specialize in trade with another country, as long as the terms of trade are acceptable, both countries should be better off, right? But there are some limitations, some situations that might cause you to restrict trade. Now, what was one way you restrict trade, Victor, that we talked about last class?
I wasn't on your last class.
Last time I was here, 2 classes ago.
I was not here.
You were?
I was in AP.
You're right, you weren't here. Blake was here. What was one way?
Tariffs.
Tariffs. So what's a tariff?
Tax on imports.
A tax on imports. Right. What's another way to restrict trade? Connor?
Quotas.
Quotas. What's quota?
It's a certain number of goods you're going to import.
Right. So you set a number that you're not going to go above for a good or a good that comes specifically from a certain country, right? So why would you have tariffs and quotas? Well, according to your book, there are several arguments that you would use to restrict trade with certain countries or with certain products and services. So one is the national defense argument. What's that argument, Nicole? I know that was an accident, but I'm going to call on you anyway. Why do you think let me just ask you, why do you think national defense, the issue of national defense would be one reason to restrict trade? Think about guns. I don't agree. Guns versus butter, perhaps, is an example. If you thought about production possibilities, frontier, and let's say the United States and China are comparing who has comparative advantage in gun and butter production. And the U.S. has a comparative advantage in LMOPC in butter production. And China has the advantage in guns. Why would the U.S. maybe restrict the amount of guns they purchase for their national defense from China?
Because they don't.
Nicole? Do we always get along great with China? No. Is it possible? I'm not saying it's probable. Do you think it's possible we could go to war with China at any point in the future? Possible, don't you think? Possible. So if you were going to say, let's specialize in trade, let's buy all of our guns, all of our military equipment from China, why would that not potentially be a smart thing? Blake?
If we do get in the war, then we have no weapons.
That's right. We get cut off from our weapons if we go to war with China. Now, I'm not saying this is probable, but one example would be the case of Taiwan. Taiwan is this little small area to the southern part of China. And if you ask the average Chinese person, definitely somebody in the Chinese government, they'd say Taiwan is part of China. It's all part of mainland China. And if you ask the average Taiwanese citizen, they say, no, we're Taiwan. We're sovereign. We're independent. Now, fortunately, it hasn't come to blows or military intervention, but there have been close calls in the last several years. We have said we recognize Taiwan's sovereignty. So what if Taiwan finally said, you know what, we're going to fire a missile at China to say, get off our backs? Well, perhaps we'd come to their assistance if this thing blew up. Now we're at war with China, or there's some kind of a military conflict. They're the ones that produce all of our guns. They're the ones that produce our I don't know, artillery, our aircraft carriers, and all that stuff. And now we can have no access to that because they get used up in the course of battle, right? It's not like these things don't get destroyed. That's not a smart thing. Not a smart position to put yourself in, right? So that's a national defense argument. If you feel like even though you can have a comparative advantage in one thing and you can leave it up to another country to specialize in production of another thing and then trade, if that has to do with your national defense and you feel like you might not have great relations with that country in the near future, that wouldn't be smart. So maybe you want to restrict, I don't know about eliminate, but restrict trade with that country. What's another more recent example? What happened? Somebody died earlier this week, right? What was that guy's name again? Oh yeah, Osama bin Laden, right. Where did they find him? They found him in Pakistan. We didn't quite know where he was, but we found him in Pakistan. Connor?
One question about that, can this work with exports as well? Exporting guns in certain places and restricting trade?
Sure.
Because we gave tons of money to Pakistan and guns to Pakistan.
Or if you want to go back even further, historically we gave a lot of money and equipment to people associated, that's right, with Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan years and years ago. Right? So yeah, it does work in reverse. But let's stick with Pakistan. What happened, Victor? What happened this week?
Okay, so what happened was that Obama found a nightmare where Osama bin Laden was.
Great. He's in Pakistan. We sent a bunch of Navy SEALs in. We killed him. All right. Let's move past that. Everybody knows about that.
Okay.
What's going on between us and Pakistan? Do we have a good relationship as of the last couple of days? No. What's going on?
I just don't know.
Ben?
Well, Pakistan is like this, so we didn't tell them they were going in, and then like we're
Right.
decided until like we think that they knew that he was there. Like there's no way.
We have a lot of questions about how he could be practically under the nose of one of their elite military training academies for years, and they supposedly have no clue, right? At the same time, they're mad at us, their military, because we just went in. We didn't ask for permission. We told them after the fact. We're like, yeah, he's dead. Just wanted to let you know. We sent in a bunch of Navy SEALs and shot him in the head. So they have complaints. So right now, our relationships with people in the government of Pakistan, even though technically they're an ally, on some level, is very shaky. So if we had been trading arms with them, and then that relationship deteriorates for whatever reason, now we're kind of stuck, right? Because we had been depending on Pakistan. There's all kinds of examples out there, but That's one argument for restricting trade. Okay, we spent a little more time on that than I wanted us to, but national defense argument. What's another argument according to your book?
Dumping.
What's that? Anti-dumping argument. So what's dumping?
Really
Selling
cheap.
exports at less than your cost.
That's right. That's what the book says. Selling your exports at less than cost. So we have accused China of this over the last several years, saying that they are trying to penetrate our market and put our businesses, American businesses, out of business by selling their products at less than cost. That's not what their long-term plan is, but in the short term, if they put us out of business and then they corner the market, then they'll have time to raise their prices. Okay, they don't operate with the same kind of economic system as we do, even though there's been a lot of economic liberalization. They're still a communist country. It's very centralized. We've said, you know what? We can't depend so much on importing goods and services, but primarily goods, merchandise, from China. Because in some cases, if we allow them to export here whatever they want at whatever price, they could drive American companies out of business. Okay? So that's the anti-dumping argument. You can try to battle dumping by using trade restrictions. Bless you. What's another one in your book? The infant industry argument. If you have a new industry, particularly one that's emerging in your country, and it has to compete on the world stage against companies that have been around a longer time in that industry from other countries, that you might want to protect those in your country that are trying to get these new companies and this new industry off the ground. Okay? Infant refers to new. And then maybe once they're mature enough in the future, you don't protect them as much. Okay? The low foreign wages argument. Sometimes the argument for restricting trade is that other countries have an unfair advantage and they treat their workers unfairly, whether it's through the use of sweatshops or by not paying a high enough wage or by not providing health insurance and some of these things that, I don't know if I can say anymore, that we take for granted in the United States, but that we expect. Okay? We expect to be able to have a decent standard of living in the United States. Also, saving domestic jobs argument, this kind of overlaps, and the foreign export subsidies argument. So these are all arguments for restricting trade. So I just wanted to make sure I got that out there because some of you guys weren't here 2 classes ago. All right. Now I want to move on to the last chapter, chapter 31, the balance of payments, and talk about this again. And then go back to some of the questions we reviewed from the 2005 AP exam. Balance of payments. Before we do the balance of payments, what I want you to do in your notes right now is to draw a circular flow with 4 sectors. Domestic includes consumers, firms, government, and then you have net exports or foreign countries interacting with this circular flow. Label the whole thing. Please, ready, set, go. Well, this hasn't happened very often, but this has been a small freak on the AP exam in the past. So how much time on average would you say you should allot for that? For a small freak? 12 and a half. For a small freak. They say do the circular flow of 12 and a half minutes. So you have 10 minutes to do the circular flow.